Okay, good morning, everyone. As to Professor Yin Li from China. So we also have our members and affiliates of the Young Scientists Network Academy of Sciences Malaysia. We have fellows, we have deans, we have professors affiliated to Academy of Sciences Malaysia, and also fellow audience and participants on Zoom and live here at ASM in Kuala Lumpur. So I welcome all of you to the inaugural YSN-ASM Science Diplomacy Training Program held at ASM Kuala Lumpur on the 1st November 2022. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. So my name is Fidaus, and I am the chair of the organizing committee of this training program. So we would like to thank Professor Yin Li for spending some time in between your busy schedule to be with us this morning. So on behalf of the YSN, ASM, and the Academy, I would like to thank all of you for being with us this morning to listen to Professor Yin Li's talk on anticipatory science diplomacy. So without further ado, I would like to call upon our moderator and chair for today to introduce Professor Yin Li and to conduct this public talk this morning. Please welcome.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sok Ching, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our main speaker for this science diplomacy workshop, Professor Yin Li. Professor Li is a professor of the Institute of Microbiology at the Chinese Academy of Sciences in China. He holds degrees, BSc and PhD degrees in fermentation engineering from Jiangnan University in China, and was appointed as a visiting professor at the Cornell University in the United States of America. Professor Li's interest is in industrial biotechnology, a very relevant field in today's world, particularly where we talk about climate change and looking after the earth, where he converts carbon dioxide into organic matter and into useful products. Using synthetic biology approaches, he develops novel biocatalysts contributing to sustainable bio-based manufacturing industries. He has published extensively, and I'm not going to mention all of this, or else we're not going to start our session. Professor Li is a member of the scientific board of the International Basic Science Program of UNESCO and the International Advisory Council on Global Bioeconomy. He's also the director of the Chinese Academy of Science Trust Center of Excellence for Biotechnology. Professor Li was awarded the Trust Regional Prize for Building Scientific Institutions in 2012, and he has many other scientific awards, too many to state them all here. I've had the pleasure and privilege of working with Professor Li in a very different setting. Professor Li is the founding chair of the World Academy of Science Young Affiliates Network, or TIAN for short, and I was privileged to serve with him and other international young scientists in the inaugural TIAN Executive Committee to realize our vision of a world connected by scientific collaboration. This morning, Professor Li will be speaking about anticipatory science diplomacy. Professor Li, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Cheong, for your nice and warm introduction. It is really my great honor and privilege to speak at this session. So let me share my screen. Just 1 second. First of all, let me thank the chair again, and also Professor Cheong again for your nice introduction. And as I said, I'm greatly honored to be the public speaker for this meeting. I think it's very important for the ASN and the YSN-ASM to organize this very important meeting for scientists, not only for young scientists. For the anticipatory scientific diplomacy, it's new for most of the scientists, and I try to share some of my understanding and our practices throughout this presentation. Many of us are aware that this is really a challenging time for the over 100 years, as we understood. So climate change, as Professor Cheong just mentioned, a lot of environmental issues, natural disasters we heard many times on TV, Especially in the last 3 years, we are fighting with the COVID-19 and also the food security potentially emerging from the war. So those are the pressing challenges that require scientists to provide science-based solutions for the future common development and the prosperity. So this is a great challenge for many scientists working on different disciplines. To my understanding, what is the anticipatory science diplomacy? Basically, there are 3 basic elements. So we try from the scientist's perspective or from a policy maker to anticipate the potential benefits and the risk of scientific advance. From a scientist's point of view, often provoke the benefits, but we have to admit there are also risks associated with scientific developments. But most importantly, we want to speak using our voice to tell the international community how can we ensure that all countries, that no matter rich or poor, can benefit from the scientific innovations that every audience that you are making. And most importantly, we hope the authorities would develop legal international frameworks that may be necessary to protect or regulate the new technologies. And mostly I will cover the first 2 parts in this presentation, and I will not talk about too much on the regulation side, which also is very important. So to understand why we are promoting the anticipatory science diplomacy, I think we better first understand the journey of science and technology in the last 500 or 600 years. So this is often we need to go back to see how we are reaching today. So this is what we see if we dating back to the 16th century, and we will review the last 500 years, the development of science technology. We find it very interestingly, actually this alternation of intellectual and technological revolution, and usually starting with intellectual revolution. We all know that from history, that from the 16th century, the Renaissance, and followed by the first industrial revolution, which is featured by the using of the steam engine. In the 18th century, we see the Enlightenment movement, and followed by the second industrial revolution, which is featured by the using of electricity. And also in the 20th century, in the center of the 20th century, we see the third of industrial revolution, which is featured by the use of internet, genetic engineering, etc. And now we are actually having a third intellectual revolution, which kind of called a globalization. We don't have a clear source for that, but the globalization is the main feature of the current society. That's many history scientists are calling that there are 4th industrial revolution. We are at the eve of the 4th industrial revolution. And for this industrial revolution, we know that each industrial revolution is followed by the science and the technological revolution before the industrial revolution can happen. So during the last 500 years, actually, you can see the advancement of thoughts. The science technology is the fundamental driving source for human civilization forward. And this is the first I want to share with you. Very interestingly, a Japanese scientist, a philosopher called Yusa Mitsutuma, he proposed in 1962 that he found by studying the history of science technology in the last 500 years, he found actually a phenomenon called a periodic transfer of science centers associated with the intellectual and industrial revolution that I mentioned to you. So from the last 500 years, you can see that the World Science Center shifted from Italy, Britain, France, Germany, and to US today. What we here call the Science Center is the general science output from that country can represent over 25%. That is basically 1/4 or even more than the out of the whole world output. Then we can define that country is the science center of the world. So those movements are clearly also documented in history, and they are associated with intellectual and technology revolution. And this may not be most important, but from scientists, one important feature I want to also review is that along with this intellectual and technological revolution, there is also a research paradigm shift. So the research paradigm is actually expanding. So starting from the 6th century, as a microbiologist, we all know it starts from Leeuwenhoek from the Netherlands, a Dutch scientist. He invented the microscope. Although the microscope at that time was very simple, but it's now routinely used in the lab, in the life science laboratory. So people using the microscope to observe the micro world, and later they built up a very big telescope to observe the universe. So and from using different equipments, we are doing all kinds of experiments, and which this paradigm, which is based on experiment, lasting until now. And we are using that paradigm in all our daily practices. And for the 17th centuries, starting from the mathematicians, they are trying to not only do experiments, but doing some theoretical work. So they use a paradigm called generalization or deduction. So they try to using mathematical models to deduct or generalize from the natural phenomenon to get a more practical understanding. How can we better describe the world? Then we get some understanding of the gravity, and later from Einstein, we have more on relativity later. So we still using a lot of called generalization in our daily life, particularly for the physicist, for the mathematician. And when the computer science and associated with the third industrial revolution develops and internet develops, so we have ability for large scale computing. So we have ability to using models to do simulation. So we can do less experiments, but to get a more understanding of the natural world. So the experiment-based generalization and the simulation, and those shifts are also associated with the last 3 industrial revolution. And we just have a few examples. So starting from the observation, astronomy is basically doing a lot of experiments. But this is what we call a 500 aperture spherical radio telescope. For astronomy, basically there are 2 telescopes. One is a radio telescope, which the observation is regardless, is respective of the weather. But for the regular telescope, you have to observe on the daylight, on a very shiny day. So raining will have a great effect on that. But certainly the radio telescope can observe further in the universe. And this largest, the single radio telescope in the world could help us go deeper into the universe, try to find out whether there is really another civilization in the Earth or the other galaxies. So over the 500 years, you see that those facilities are building from the microscope to really mega facilities around the world. But astronomy is not only for observing using a single telescope. Astronomy is a field that really requires extensive international collaboration. We all understand from that. One of the practice that we did was we know a country in South America, in Chile, it has the world's best condition for using the regular telescope. So the European Southern Telescope Observatory is built in Chile, which has a 4 by 8 meter diameter telescope. So a lot of countries are collaborating with European Southern Observatory to observe those things which are not available on the north atmosphere on that. The Chinese Academy of Sciences also built up called the South American Center for Astronomy. So with the international team, then we together with the observatory in China and in other countries, so we could monitor the whole upper space outside of the Earth. At many occasions, we are not only using one paradigm from experiments or generalization or simulation, but we are using a supercomposition of 3 paradigms. Here, I just want using a climate change to give you an idea how is that working. For instance, at upper space or at the ground of the Earth, we are using different methods. For instance, observatory or satellite-based or microwave-based or the other radio technology-based to observe the climate change around the globe. So as you can see from here, this different color represent different instruments for doing the observation experiments. So from that, you actually get a huge amount of data. How to process that kind of data? So you do need a model. So then you have a second paradigm. So using the deduction, you build up different models from different perspectives, from the soil, from the deep sea, from the ice cores, etc. You build up models so that you can simplify, or you can try to input those data observed and output something that you can understand. And using this observation and deduction, and then you need a really strong supercomputing. Using supercomputing tools, then you can process those data that no single person can process. Here we mentioned this 1 hour supercomputing is actually 1.3 billion, the whole population of China, working for 1,000 years can be accomplished. But that's unimaginable before this supercomputer can happen. So using those combination, supercomposition of these paradigms, then you see that's what we saw from the weather forecast, those change of the cloud, the storm forming, things like that. But those things appear on your television, then you know it's actually produced by the science observation, by the scientific deduction and generalization, and also a large amount of computing. So this is an example for that. But now, when we enter the recent 21st century, we see another shift of the research paradigm, which is driven by the big data. If you go back to look at experiment, generalization, and simulation, so we see these have a prerequisite. So basically, you have a cause and effect. So you make an assumption, you make a hypothesis, then you observe, then you generalize, then you simulation, you try to address that hypothesis, whether it's correct or not correct. But now at the era of big data, you don't need to have a hypothesis. So you try to analyze the correlation between this big data before you can propose a reasonable hypothesis. So the cause and effect is not a prerequisite anymore in the new era. So this is what we call the fourth research paradigm. There are many examples for the big data-driven science nowadays, and we all understood from that. One of the examples in life science area is called this AlphaFold. We are now using AlphaFold to predict the 3D structure of protein based on its amino acid sequence. And how does that happen? Because the AlphaFold, they have learned from the many thousands of the protein structure and try to get correlation between the protein structure and also the amino acids, so that it can build up such a model that people can use that to predict the protein structure from amino acids. Also, it's not very accurate enough, 96, 97% accuracy, which for many scientists, we do not need to crystallize the proteins in our life, and we can still do the mutation and the function analysis. Another example is the Human Genome Project, which has accomplished 20 years ago. For any sequencing project, basically, it's discovery-driven. The discovery-driven is the big data-driven. And you now see that in the big data area, the science is getting even bigger. So no single person or no single group or not even single country can accomplish the global challenges. So the Human Genome Project is a consortium comprised of 6 countries, where China only takes 1%. But now there's an even bigger astronomy project called Square Kilometer Array. They try to using square kilometer radio telescope to have a deeper understanding of the universe, which have the ability much bit stronger than a single 500 meter, the FAST, which I showed you just before. So the Square Kilometer Array is an international organization with headquarters in UK, but with those array located in Australia and in South Africa for doing the experiments. And this international thermonuclear experiment reactor is another very important international organization headquartered in France. But their mission is to build up a nuclear fusion technology that hoping that we can use that nuclear fusion, basically it's artificial sun, for future energy supply. It's not reaching yet, but now they can already, I think in China, the part of that can supply the nuclear fusion for a few seconds. So really showing the potential for the future energy supply mode for that. And we're not only using this international collaboration for big science projects, but you could also turn the very frontier science into potential application. So if you will recall, just 1 month ago, we know this year's Nobel Prize for Physics was awarded to quantum science. And one of the scientists awarded was Professor Zallinger, the president of the Austrian Academy of Sciences, who has a lot of collaboration with China. His president, his students called Professor Pan Jianwei was also one of the very first TUAS young affiliates. Later was selected as the member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences and also the member of the TUAS. And he initiated a quantum science project in China in 2006. Well, they built up quantum communication and later developed into quantum telephone network. And in 2016, they launched the quantum satellite called Mencius. Mencius is an ancient Chinese philosopher. And using that quantum satellite, they set up an intercontinental quantum communication, which is supposed to be very confidential communication among continental, which among Professor Zallinger, Nobel laureate this year, and Professor Chen Bai, the ex-president of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. And recently, they have also developed what we call a quantum communication trunk line from Beijing to Shanghai, which is about 1,000 kilometers. So quantum science is not in application yet, but we see that the quantum communication, quantum sensing, and quantum computing are developing from the very frontier science, only theoretical breakthrough, but moving slowly but steadily to the potential applications fields. So this is another very good example combining the four paradigms from experiment, generalization, and deduction, simulation, and also the big data connection. So recently, the big science is really a combination of different paradigms. So you see from all these big science projects, the international collaboration is a must to drive those big science projects forward. So these slides shows actually how the intensity of the cross-border collaboration on papers are constantly growing. So from 2015, well, we see kind of, you see those kind of dots represent the intensity. So the bigger the circle, the more intense the research collaboration. So you see, compare the data in 2015 and 2019, you see that the node appeared on this figure is expanding, meaning that more countries are joined to this international collaboration network, and also the position of different countries are kind of shifting. And in general, the diameter of those circles are expanding, meaning that the intensity of the collaboration is growing. However, the COVID-19 changed a lot. So that's why we only select the data on 2019. Everybody experienced in the last 3 years, this kind of collaboration drops significantly in many, many countries. So we really hope that by this kind of diplomacy workshop, everybody listen to this workshop could contribute to expanding this network again when we are this virus is no longer a threat. So we can see that actually this is the international collaboration and the collaboration position of the four paradigm. Actually, they are reshaping the innovation class. So the innovation today have more reliance on the international scientific cooperation. And if I can draw four keywords, I would say that by more open and frequent communication, then we get a more creative thoughts. And driven by those more creative thoughts, we can design and implement many activities which rely on the cross-border synergy and joint inputs. And we know many countries have different economic development levels, so we are not expecting all the countries in the world could develop mega facilities. So for the capacity building, there should be a better balance between the developing and the developed countries. And we must ensure, as I said earlier, all those output from scientific investments must be more equitable, be more shared among the technical output by the whole society so that we can share the benefits. So I will just illustrate more on those four keywords. we asked another question. We said international collaboration did play a very important role in today's big science, but how does international collaboration happen? Is that naturally happen, or where is the beginning? That's still dates back to 500 years ago. So openness and this kind of is the native things for scientific collaboration. So dating back to 16th centuries, that there's a great philosopher called Francis Bacon. He has a lot of scientific thoughts, and he has a vision of internationalization called a Solomon Palace, which many of you may have heard of that in practice. So driven by this Solomon Palace in 1660, there's a kind of institution called Invisible College, initially consisting only 12 people. So it became the first form of the scientific organization. So they are actually growing to more 100 scientists and became the former Royal Society of the UK. So this is the early stage. And we know Newton was one of the former scientists involved in the Royal Society of the UK. And when I visited that house, I can still see the signature of Newton. So very well preserved. So the Francis Bacon's Solomon Palace, actually, this concept expanded over the last 400 years. So making a lot of development of the academy institutions around the world. So this actually the kind of countries before 1949 where the Chinese Academy of Sciences formed. And there are many, many more, including Academy of Science of Malaysia, and in many countries, they are forming academies of science. But the Chinese Academy of Sciences actually are a little bit different. So together with the previous, the Russian Academy of Sciences and many East European countries, this is a research entity. It's not only an academy. So we have more than 100 research institutes. So perhaps the Chinese Academy of Sciences is the largest research network of research and innovation for that. And so we realized for only the scientists, when we are forming an academy and we are doing the real science, may not contribute to the world. And there are many international science organizations, including the IAP Inter-Academy Panel. They're organizing many activities, which is great. But in 2018, the Chinese Academy of Sciences actually proposed to set up a called Alliance of International Science Organization. This called ANSO, actually with a mission catalyze collaboration in science, technology, innovation, and in particular, the capacity building, because we are aware the capacity building is the weakest part in the developing world. So with this capacity building, we're hoping not only to talk, but also to do practical research work to bring benefits to the people, to the society. That's what we anticipatory science diplomacy should do. So ANSO actually has many missions. Those missions are more or less related to UN SDG goals, relating, for instance, the third pole environment, the disaster, and also the ethnic drug development, infectious diseases, clean water, biodiversity issues, all pressing environmental related and biodiversity, climate related things to our world. So the third pole environment is a definition we know there's a North Pole and the South Pole, but whereas the third pole is the Himalaya region, which has a lot of glaciers, actually has the highest altitude, so we call it third pole. So actually in the North Pole, the South Pole, and the third pole, there are 4 circles called atmosphere, the chromosphere, the hydrosphere, and the biosphere. All those spheres have interactions for that. So actually, by monitoring the North Pole, the South Pole, and the South Pole, for instance, you see actually constant melting down of the iceberg, and also the glaciers, and also the frozen soil. So showing significant evidence supporting the global warming effect for that. And even in the Himalaya region, people can find the dark carbon particles in those glaciers. So suggesting actually the carbon dioxide emission, and by incomplete burning of the carbon, the fossil resources actually resulted from the glacier melt. Along the Himalaya region, actually China has a border with Pakistan and India with very long range, but a lot of glaciers in Pakistan, which was not very well documented. So the SUBACO, which is a commission in Pakistan, working on the upper space, collaborated with the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Actually, we have a deep understanding for glacier inventory of the Pakistan. This is our former vice president in charge of international collaboration. They sent this book as a gift to the director of the SUBACO. So using that inventory, you could have a more comprehensive understanding of what's happening inside of the Pakistan for that. And people can get a better understanding and a better prediction of the potential threats for the future. Another thing that happened in 2010 was a very big, huge landslide in Pakistan, forming a very big barrier lake. And this barrier lake actually blocking the only highway called the Karakoram connecting Pakistan and China. And actually, because it's a barrier lake, a very big barrier lake, it's threatening the safety of 500,000 people on downstream. So one of the institutes working on mountain hazard in Chinese Academy of Sciences, they're working with the Pakistan scientists. They proposed a disposal plan for using excavating lagoons and active protection, which is more cost efficient than the proposal from the Swedish scientists, save 50%, and actually helped the barrier lake reduce the level by 30% and eliminated the threats and later become a local tourist attraction until now. So regarding the clean water, we know Sri Lanka has a disease called chronic kidney disease of unknown etiology. So this CKDU disease actually affected half of the people in Sri Lanka, more or less degrees. So water environmental research to clean water technology solution were provided by China Sri Lanka Clean Water Technology Center. And they actually got joint funding from the National Science Foundation from China and also from the National Science from Sri Lanka to support fund research from the both scientists from both countries to perform research to tackle those CKDU and very good progress. And in Africa, in Kenya, we also developed called the Sino-African Joint Research Center in Kenya. Kenya does not have a clear understanding of how many what's the inventory of the plant species and what's the potential resources there. So we built up a botanical garden at Kenya in Nairobi, and using the funding support from the Chinese, the Ministry of Commerce for that, a very big botanical garden by the Chinese Botanical Garden of Wuhan. And this botanical garden is not only a tourist place, but it's more or less for doing research and helping them to understand better the biodiversity in surrounding region. And very importantly, the medicinal plants in Kenya is very rich, and we help them to collect different medicinal plants and moving that into Masai Mara University and forming a medicinal plant garden, which is very good looking, but also helping to train the local students and also for developing to the potential industry for preparing the arsenic drug for local economy. So for doing that, basically, as I showed to you, we need this kind of a platform and we need a research. And for doing research, we are actually nurturing the next generation talent, which is the future for the development of the economy and the society of different countries. That's why we come up with the idea for the TN, as you just heard from Professor Soqing Chung. TN is called the TWAS Young Affiliate Network. Well, TWAS is the World Academy of Sciences for the advancement of science in the developing world. So basically, we can understand this is an academy for the developing world. So Young Affiliates is a kind of a setting was set up in 2008. So every year, there are 25 young affiliates being elected as excellent scientists or outstanding young scientists globally by different academy, 5 regions of the TWAS. But when I was elected as TWAS Young Affiliates in 2010, I noticed the facts. Actually, the young academies they do not know each other. And because they are junior, so they are afraid of communicating with the senior scientist, which is TWAS fellow, although they are invited to join those annual meeting of the TWAS. So we came up with an idea, so why should we organize a network, then asking those young scientists to network with each other and forming a community. So that was the idea. So you see Professor Soqing Chung was one of the early scientists that are sitting in front of in the first row. They will form that in Kigali, and many active young affiliates participated in that. So that's the inaugural meeting figure that we had together with our Professor Choni Bai, sitting here, and also now the President Hassan, President of TWAS. This is the 8 brothers and sisters in the first executive committee that we worked together for nearly 5 years and to form TN and making TN from a baby to its childhood and still not developing. Now we have shifted to Professor Franco Cambrizo, who is from Argentina. He is now the chair of the TN, and he's heading the executive committee and building up more activities to build a TN to an even stronger community for that. Dr. Chung also mentioned, we try to build a TN to have a very lifelong feature for that. So we must have a strong vision. So the vision of TN is we want to build up a world connected by scientific cooperation. So the mission of TN is we want to catalyze the interdisciplinary collaboration to address global challenges. This is because the TN, the young affiliates, they have different backgrounds from the mathematics, biology, chemistry, physics, and computing science. So this is a big resources, and if those people with a multidisciplinary background come together, they must come back to very active, very creative solutions to many global challenges, and that's what we see over the last couple of years. So we want to grow in a collaborative network and building our capacity and competence and addressing challenges through research and increasing our visibility. That's what we define our medium to long-term goal. How we do that is we actually organize the meetings. The called a TCGA, the TN Collaborative Grants Award, that we actually support the young affiliates to travel to different countries to meet with people they don't know. It's not necessarily to be young affiliates, but could be people who are excellent scientists working in developed countries, for instance, in the United States, to build up collaborations. And we're using this TCGA to facilitate collaboration. So when they visit each other, they're using their existing funding to join the research and creating many research outputs. I'm not going to talk about detail. As I said, later, Professor Soqing Chung also will talk about the TN, so she may have more information for you. And we organize many called the TITO, the TN International Workshop. The first TITO workshop on materials in Argentina organized on materials. You see many active young scientists working together. And there's many stories. They form up together. So for instance, the Mirabos and Ronaldo and Mirabos and Adewale, they formed an excellent brilliant idea and coming back resulting in a very good publication in chemistry. And this is the one that Professor Soqing Chung will talk later on cancer, which I think is brilliant. The brilliant thing is because not only generating publications, but also generating potential, very important funding from just one single workshop. And this is excellent. And you see many TITO workshops organized in the last couple of years with very limited funding from the TN, which is donated by the Lenovo, which is a personal computing company funded by the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So they are working on pressing challenges, cancer, the materials, sustainable agriculture, and big data, and One Health, all pressing challenges that we are facing nowadays. And we also have the voice of TN members on global matters. This is very important because, for instance, when we see that it's COVID-19, we have the need for more multinationalism and international collaboration in the face of COVID-19, which was also supported by TWAS at that very difficult time in 2020. And also we have a statement on the article President in Charge, which is also related to every scientist on that. So this is really TN members play a role in anticipatory science diplomacy for that. So I think I'm running out of time. So I want to summarize that. So this again, I share with you a little bit, a few examples showing how by openly sharing our thoughts and we can receiving more thoughts, more ideas from different background scientists. Particularly we are benefiting from our multidisciplinary background very much. And driven by those creative ideas, no matter you have funding or not, no matter you have a big or small funding, we can do all kinds of activities ranging from the joint experiments or to joint policy papers or joint workshops or joint visits. And all those are creating more thoughts on, which for me a very good feedback. And then we utilize those thoughts and activities and we use different capacities. We know the capacities has imbalanced distribution among developed countries, where we're provoking that all countries try to share their capacity. And it's actually a global understanding, global common sense, that a capacity should be shared to support the nurturing of the young scientists, to support of the public science. And I show you just a few examples. How can the society that benefits from those scientific innovations, from the capacity building, from our joint activities? And there may be more activities and maybe more examples can be shown in later today's discussion. Therefore, I conclude that developing effective collaboration driven by openly discussed thoughts is the essence of the anticipatory science diplomacy. So I encourage you, the audience, young scientists or the established scientists, to try to share what we have, what we can, or what we thought about that to the world. And we still believe the mission, the vision of TN, a world connected by scientific collaboration, is valid in all kinds of disciplines, is valid in all kinds of different age groups, is valid in all kinds of disciplines. So by doing so, developing effective collaborations, we trust we will help the science technology develop for common good, and we will help innovation for a better future for the society, for the mankind, for the globe. Thank you.
Yin Li for the very inspiring and brilliant lecture. I'm going to open the floor to questions both online and on site. And there are some questions coming in online. But maybe as the chair, I'm going to use my prerogative to start the ball rolling. So thank you very much for sharing the experience of some of the initiative China has already with Pakistan or Sri Lanka and also Latin America. And those are really good examples of really cross-border collaborations. Apart from the obvious altruism and also, the logic of advancing humankind, I would like to pose the question, perhaps drawing from your own experience as the previous Director General of the Bureau of International Cooperation at the Chinese Academy of Science. I would like to know what are the motivations for CAS, for example, to really ensure that the technological advancements that are developed in the north and also within China actually reach the communities that most need it, and what are the motivations of CAS in doing that, and maybe what are some of the lessons that other academies can learn?
Thank you, Professor Chung, for this very inspiring question. Well, the basic motivation is science for all. And China, over the last 40 years, the open reform, the best benefits that we got is our talents. including me and many scientists, are trained in the developed countries, including US and European countries. So we are actually benefited from the open science. And many scientists in the developed countries, and they use all they know and to share with us. So this led people to understand the science has no borders, and this is a general understanding. So at this stage, so once China develops, and it is also time to contribute the wisdom and also the capacity that we have to the rest of the world. That's why we have more and more graduate students, international graduate students, and even the undergraduates from developing countries coming to China to different universities for study, as we did in our early days. And certainly the US and European countries are all the desirable destinations. And China is not the preferred yet. And so because of the language barrier, etc., but it's increasing. So we see it's natural. So for the scientists holding the knowledge, we have the willingness to share this willingness and to help those needed as we got the help at the time that we needed. So this is the general common sense as a human being. I think this is when I was the Director General of the International Collaboration Bureau of the CAS, at least I was that kind of thinking. The challenge is the resources also limiting, always limited. That's why we have two ways. So one way is we provide a scholarship for the students, motivated students from the world can come to China. This is actually including from the developed countries and developing countries. And on the other hand, we go out, for instance, we build up overseas research centers in different countries wherever there is a need. So for instance, in Sri Lanka, most of the Sri Lanka students do not have an opportunity to study in CAS University, but we can organize training course at Sri Lanka, which can benefit 100 each year. So as time goes, so this number will increase and these seeds will grow. So the students can be, in the future, could be lecturers. So this chain will last as long as you keep doing that. As I mentioned, for the China, South America, the Astronomy Center, we're actually using funding to support a postdoc for doing research together with the local, because that's the heaven for the global astronomers. So we also try to apply the time as European Southern Observatory. So that is actually international community. We are just part of that. So we think this was also decided by the characteristics of the CAS, because CAS is not only a member institute, it's a research organization. So it has its own funding scheme. It also has a company because it has a CAS holding. So it has the resources to support those activities. So going back to how the other academies, if it's only member institution, how can we do better for that? I think at least, I said research costs a lot of money. But as the workshop we organized today, as the policy paper that we're organizing, and those kind of things all contributes to the knowledge increase of the general society. So I think my conclusion is, so using your own strengths and to contribute to the spread of the knowledge of the science to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Professor Lee. I think the message is trying to pay it forward and sow the seeds for the next generation to continue advancing science. I would like to invite questions from the floor for on-site participants. Do you have any questions? Dr. Firdaus, do you have a mic for me? Firdaus, you can come over here. Yeah, just come over.
Hello. Hi, Professor Yin Li. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly.
So thank you for your talk. I think that was a good start for this training course. So there was an excellent overview of the efforts that the Chinese Academy of Sciences and scientists in China are doing in the domain of science diplomacy. And we have seen so many science in diplomacy or science for diplomacy activities that you have presented. So I would like to know if there are any formal programs in China to integrate science as part of the diplomatic endeavors. So this is just another way of looking at it instead of science for diplomacy, but maybe diplomacy for science as well, if there are any. Thank you.
Well, regrettably, the word science diplomacy is not well used in China. So we also try to understand why, because we are not using that word frequently at formal occasions. We often use in open innovation and the open science and open science technology collaboration or, for what we do. And so perhaps the scientist it's easier for scientists to focus on the science and the common good for the people, and rather talking about the diplomacy. Although, as I understood from the definition of the science diplomacy, what we did actually can be categorized into this sector. I think overall, not only the Chinese Academy of Sciences, but China overall, they are investing more to inviting more foreign students coming to China for further studies. And they are open for foreign postdocs coming to China to find an appropriate organization for doing further research and also working in China. So the green card system has been established for foreigners with very good track record to work in university or institutes or companies. It takes time, but basically, as the president says, the gates of China will be open and will never be closed. So we benefited from the open reform, and this will be the national policy that will be continuing.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And thank you, Dr. Firdaus, for that question. Dr. Firdaus is really championing science diplomacy here in Malaysia together with the team. And also, he's also involved in science diplomacy in the ASEAN region. So we're really happy that we have a champion here. And although the word diplomacy probably, like Professor Yin may say, may not be uttered very commonly in China, but however, I think from the examples, we can certainly see that there are quite a lot of international collaborations going on, regardless of the terminology. So there are some questions online, and I would like to take one, but phrase it a little bit. I would like to know from your experience, how do we bring information about what's cooking in the lab, right? Because we're talking about anticipatory science, right? So how do we bring information about what's cooking in the lab more frequently to informal discussions with stakeholders, including policy makers, so that we can encourage the mutual learning between the stakeholders, particularly those who make political decisions. This is very important for Malaysia because we're going to have our election in a few weeks. So basically, how do we create this environment where what's cooking in the lab can be acted on sooner rather than later?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Choi. I think this is a great question. I also noticed that in China, we also noticed that scientists is let me rephrase. The scientist, which is very good at communicating, is very rare. Yeah. So for the website of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, we post many good papers. Basically, those raw materials are, raw documents are written by the scientists who published those papers. I have to admit that many of that is very difficult to be understood by the general public. In China, we have a saying, so you understand every word, but when you put those words together into one sentence, you don't know the meaning of the sentence. So that's for the public. And we have to be aware of that. The politicians' understanding to the science is not much different from the general public. So if we want the politicians to fund us more, then we must learn how to use simple words to describe our cooking in the lab. But unfortunately, I would say 99.99% of scientists don't have this understanding. So that's why I take this opportunity to communicate with our fellow scientists. If you cannot convey the message of what you are cooking in the lab to your wife or your husband or your daughter in high school level, then it's unbelievable that you can communicate with the politicians. So that's a training that we have to bear in mind. But unfortunately, and this point has not been noted or recognized by many scientists, because many scientists are playing with himself or herself in her or his own words. And when he's presenting the scientific story, usually only he or him is understood what he's talking, and nobody else. That's why many of us were falling asleep. Yeah. So I think I'm aware of what your question is, but I would suggest that a scientist should have a kind of entrepreneurship spirit, because all the entrepreneurs, they have the spirit to benefit the others. But not many scientists have this kind of spirit to benefit others. Only try to think about how to benefit my interest. If my interest is benefited, I'm happy enough. I don't care whether the other people is interested or is benefited or not even enough. Yeah. And that's why many scientists can only receive small amount of funding to sustain very basic research in a lab. That's very important. I'm not criticizing that. But if we could let scientists know that their science, if can be cooked better, using better words to communicate it to the general public, we may get more funding for the overall scientific community, and we may get more students working in the lab, and that's even better. So this is actually a group effort and cannot be done in one single day. And it's not only a practice for what we organize a workshop for learning from the media. It's a general understanding the importance of science communication. Yeah.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. Actually, there's a question from the online young scientist, and maybe inspired by your journey, being a microbiologist and being able to talk about space science and chronic kidney disease really fluently. This participant would like to know what is your advice in terms of maybe from your own personal journey, developing the skill sets in order to better communicate with policymakers?
Thank you. This is also a very important question. I think I have the answer is actually it accumulates. Firstly, from myself, I'm very interested in history. So I'm interested in many different things. But you will see when you're interested in many different things, you have very limited time to go deeper in one specific area. Yeah. So because you only have 24 hours. I was trained as a microbiologist, so I was mainly familiar with biotechnology until I was serving as the Director General position for the Bureau of International Collaboration. And because of the platform, the CAS, which has the basic 6 disciplines, mathematics, physics, astronomy, chemistry, geography, and biology. So in that position, I have to learn to communicate with different, very excellent young scientists to understand their needs, the basic disciplines. So that's a special position actually forced me to accelerate learning from different perspectives, but I'm still only know a few words. If you ask me more questions on that, I'm nuts. Yeah. So, but that also helped me because if you stood out from your own discipline, you understand how can you communicate your microbiology discovery to astronomers. And if you can do that, you can certainly communicate your discovery to the politicians. So my advice to young scientists is that you need to stand higher to a higher level. As you climb the mountain, if you stood on the mountain, top of the mountain, on the Himalaya side, you see all the world. And if you're only on the root of the mountain, you only see a little bit of the mountainside. So when you try to stand out of your own disciplinary and you try to understand, try to cross-talk with the other scientists in different countries, and you try to understand them, then you will understand why they don't understand you. So try to go out from yourself, and you will find the world is actually much bigger than you thought.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any more questions from the floor? If not, then I think I would really end the session on that really nice and inspiring advice from one of the, if I remember correctly, from Professor Yin Lee's introduction at the excuse me, at the Tian at our first meeting at Tian, that he's one of the youngest professors, youngest scientists being appointed professor in China, and that's really not an easy feat, as you all can imagine. So on that note, I would like to thank Professor Yin Lee. It's a pleasure having you here, and really great to see you. And we're going to talk about Tian a little bit later, and all the good work that the young scientists have done globally. And thank you for your presence here today. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, all the fellow scientists. It's really a pleasure. It's really an honor to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.